Today's adventure wasn't a good one. It seemed as if adventures inside the digital circus had only two outcomes. Either it was something mildly entertaining and creative, or a borderline dangerous chore. It felt as if most of the time, however, these adventures were specifically designed to torment one specific character of the formerly human roster. And today's adventure was no exception. The second you saw the letters GUG appear behind Kane, you knew what was up. "Today's adventure is GUG's new eyes!" shouted Kane. GUG was a 10-foot-tall monstrosity. An obese, violent creature that was just as dumb as it was hungry. Of course, it wasn't as tall as other creatures summoned by Kane, but GUG could still be a massive pain in the butt. Kane just loved his creature of the week shenanigans. GUG had sickly pink skin, almost as if his body was entirely covered in a rash. He had a toothless mouth, which wouldn't be so threatening if it wasn't for the fact that his tongue was akin to a giant yellow leech that just loved attaching to anything that moved. GUG had 3 eyes, and in theme of the adventure, 2 of them were missing. Excited, the thing sat on the stage like a giant toddler, rubbing its inflated belly and slapping it, as Kane explained that today GUG would once again be unleashed, and he would only vanish if the 2 eyes missing were delivered to him. The only blessing was that whoever carried one of the eyes would be spared GUG's wrath, so they could deliver it in peace. He even was so nice to grant a grace period of 10 seconds after delivery, before GUG would go after them once again. Ugh, you hated GUG. You hated looking at it. But GUG loved you. And the moment Kane declared the adventure to start, he was after you specifically, hyper-focusing only on you, running on his fat, stumpy legs after you as he flailed with his flabby arms. "Douglas!" he shouted. "This would be funny if it wasn't so disgusting," commented Jax, while he and the others discussed an attack plan. They split up into various sections of the circus, while you just ran for your life. You didn't know where you were, but eventually you had managed to lose GUG. Conveniently, a door to the exit maze had opened up, so that was a pretty good place to hide. The tables, the many rooms, the liminal atmosphere. Sure, it was terrifying, especially with a giant meat monster after you. And whenever you opened the door, you risked bumping into the giant mass of flesh. But at least you could catch your breath. You were hiding inside of an empty cabinet, breathing heavily through your mouth. You never were a good runner, and the only reason you managed to outrun GUG was the fact that you were keeping just enough distance from him so he wouldn't start crawling on all fours. Because just like the digital video game monster he was, crawling on all fours made him even faster. Instinctively you combed over your head, only to remember that technically you didn't have hair. Technically in the sense that you couldn't really touch it? In the digital circus, your body had taken on the form of a quite attractive chocolate sculpture. You appeared to be great craftsmanship as well. You were finely detailed. A depiction of the Greek goddess Aphrodite, made out of delicious milk, black and white chocolate. The clothes you were wearing luckily were seemingly real. Your closet was filled with beautiful white Greek togas that perfectly fit around you and your curves. And it wasn't for the digital circus being a nightmare, you may even felt sexy in them. Your hair was made out of white chocolate that clung to your body. Your eyes were an intricate design using white chocolate and black chocolate. And your fingernails, while still functioning like nails, just much more brittle, were made up of almond shavings that grew back on their own. But it was thanks to the fact that you weren't just a hollow confection that made you relatively resilient to blunt force trauma. And thanks to your digital nature, your body didn't melt in the heat. It just got a little stiff when it got cold. And try as they might, as long as you were just being licked, you would not lose any mass of your body. Though biting could still lead to chunks being lost from your body. And that's why you were so afraid of Gug. The last time Gug was part of an adventure, it was called Welcome to the Basement, where you and the others had to escape a dark cellar with Gug wandering around. He had bitten your legs off, which luckily, coincidentally, made you just small enough to escape through a vent by crawling on your hands. Your name in this world was Nibble, as that was the first thing that had happened to you when you first manifested. Well, obviously the one person made out of chocolate would be nibbled on by the first creature spawned by Cain, but thankfully back then it hadn't been Gug. Otherwise, your name probably would have ended up being Crunch or Crunchy, something stupid like that. You heard the unmistakable noise of an obese giant squeezing himself through a tiny door frame from somewhere on your right. The monster grunted and groaned, using his greasy body to agonizingly slowly squeeze through the opening. You watched horrified through the slits of the metal cabinet as Gug stopped right in front of you. He was sniffing the air, and he burped loudly, and scratched his groin before looking around. For a second, your eyes seemingly met, making you almost squeak in terror. But Gug didn't notice you. He just waddled past you to the left through another door frame. And that's when you realized something. Something you should not have done. You were in the exit maze. How in the hell were the others supposed to give him his eyes back so he could despawn? Crap. That might have been a good idea at first, but now this sucked. You slapped your own cheeks to hype yourself up. You were a strong little chocolate statue. You weren't afraid. That's at least what you told yourself as you got an idea. And with a loud, triumphant huzzah, you jumped out of the cabinet. The monster, which was halfway stuck through the door, turned to face you. Chocolate! He lamented as he pushed against the wall with his massive arm to get loose. You took a few steps away from Gug, towards the door he had entered. This was going to be a long day. Once Gug became loose, you ran for the door. He huffed and puffed as he tried his best to keep up with you. The best way out of the exit maze was to run through as many doors as possible, specifically in the opposite direction of whence you had entered. While that may not immediately lead to the play area, it at least wouldn't lead to the void where you would instantly be devoured by Gug. And then he'd be lost in space and time. That was a terrifying thought. Though the first problem of your valiant plan was the distance between you and Gug. Only 3 rooms past, you were actively taunting him to follow you, that he went on all fours. Thankfully he wasn't fast enough yet to just break through the walls, but gradually he was gaining on you. It was like running from a freight train. A freight train with a greedy, stinky mouth. Thankfully, Gug wasn't intelligent enough to use his enormous grabby tongue to get you. He just kept licking his lips whenever the flow of thick salvia in his mouth became too strong. Finally, he opened the right door at the end of a long, carpeted hallway. But that also led to your next problem. You were above the stage area. From here you could see the others. They were gathered around the stage. Jack standing there juggling the two slimy eyeballs in his hands, while Kane clapped his hands in enjoyment. Pomni was the first one to notice you. "Guys, look!" she shouted. But that's when they heard Gug scream behind you. "Oh god, she needs help, quick!" Ragatha pointed at Jax. "Quick, do you have a ladder or a blanket?" The rabbit blinked. Why should I have something like that?" "You always have something in your breast pocket." "Oh, yeah," snickered the bunny man as he reached into the pocket of his overall, pretending to search for an item only to flip her off once he pulled it out. "Guys, he's gaining on me!" you shouted down to them. "Just jump," said Jax nonchalantly. "What?" "Jump." That was a mighty fall. But as you turned around and saw the giant thing barreling down, you sighed. Jumping was better than getting eaten, after all. But just as you took a step forward, and you were in a free fall, you could feel a sudden and heavy pull on your arm, and a disgusting slimy feeling on your wrist. You looked up with horror as your heart almost stopped out of fear alone. Your hand was in Gug's mouth, his massive upper half hanging out of the doorway, only held back by his giant oversized thighs holding him in place as they squeezed against the doorframe. You could feel his tongue glide over your fingers. "Douglas," he mused. "Oh God, help me!" You let out a guttural scream as he was slowly sucking in more and more of your arm like it was a thick brown noodle. "Here, catch!" shouted Jax. You just barely had time to react as Jax had thrown one of the eyeballs at you. And you almost dropped it too. It wasn't heavy at all, but it was slick and slimy and quite big, so you held it on your arm like a massive football. Instantly, Gug stopped sucking, just looking at you expectantly. You want this?" He blinked with his one eye, before loudly spitting you out. From his mouth you were shot towards the ground, crashing into one of the large decorative presents that were scattered around the stage area. Though the eyeball was still in your possession, luckily. It lay there on your thighs, as you were barely able to orientate yourself. Your vision was blurry, and your dismay, it seemed like you had lost multiple chunks of your body due to the crash. Half of your head, and the entire right half of your torso. You had only one arm. Yet bravely you looked up at Gug, who was wiggling himself loose. Jack stepped next to you, the second eyeball in his hand. Like a wet towel, Gug splattered on the ground before wobbling over to the two of you. He stretched out his massive hand. Jax was the first to put the eye in the monster's palm. After it was popped in, it was your turn. You watched in disgust as that one too he shoved into his last empty eye hole. Gug turned around, triumphantly wobbling his arms, and just like that, with no pop, no poof, no fade, he was just gone. Like he never had been there to begin with. Honestly, it was a little unceremonious. It was like using the delete console command in a Bethesda game. Huh. Well, that was boring, said Jax before turning to the others. So, how about we put her back together before we get Kane, and tell him the adventure is finished? It were Kanger and Gangle who carried you into Jax's room, while Pomni and Ragatha were holding your pieces in their arms. Your fellow characters placed you down on the Bunnyman's bed, where he then pulled out his secret stash of sweets, using nougat cream to glue your pieces back together. Meanwhile, the others had left to find Kane, so you were alone with the purple bunny. Almost too carefully, Jax was repairing your shattered body. It made you a little uncomfortable. You weren't used to the bunny being so gentle with you. Why are you doing this, Jax? You asked curiously. This, putting me back together like this. He snorted. What would you prefer? If I shoved you inside a furry suit and hope for the best? You deadpanned. What? It's a joke. A little reference. He scoffed. I mean, it's you who always has an agenda. Of course I'm a little nervous. Jax's smile widened. Well, to tell you the truth, it's because of your great help in, keeping me from extracting. Your eyes widened. And while you could feel heat rise in your cheeks, thanks to your literally delicious body, you couldn't blush. Our little, anti-abstraction ritual. I get it. You said quietly. Despite what your body was made out of, it was still soft and squishy to the touch like human skin. At least, while inside the warm living quarters. It had been during your 3rd day when Jax had first suggested it. And on your 20th day was when you finally caved to his suggestions. As that when you had first encountered an abstracted being. You forced a smile. I mean, it's not like I don't enjoy it too. Jax smirked. Without warning, Jax kissed you on the lips, trying as much as he could to suckle in more of your flesh. The delicious taste of your chocolate covering the inside of his mouth. You parted your lips, allowing his tongue inside you. Of course, you weren't in love, but you enjoyed each other's company like this a lot. And the feeling you got whenever he lapped his tongue across your body. Maybe it was because you were made out of chocolate that you liked it so much. Greedily taking in the taste of your sweet, sweet skin. It was incredible. You wanted Jax to go further, but as he pushed against your shoulder to climb on top of you, your arm slid off to the side. With a thick string of chocolate-covered salvia connecting your greedy mouths, the two of you looked at your stump, and then back at your faces. Oops, sorry about that, he said with a grin. And after that hilarious encounter, he continued repairing you. And as he put the final pieces back into your thigh, he jumped up. Well, let's get to the others. We can continue this later tonight, when you're no longer in danger of breaking apart. You smirked as you got out of bed. Sounds like someone wants to be rough tonight, you joked. Maybe. Just wanna see if my repair's sold. Thank you to the people who are supporting me on Ko-fi. You guys are keeping me alive.